Volume 3 of this DVD series, we will take a look and focus exclusively on positions where black recaptures with the queen on d5. We will also look, in addition, at variations where he tries to play an early e5, either with or without taking on d4 first. In both cases, tries to maintain a symmetrical type pawn structure. We will show you how to get a slight but clear positional advantage with white. And Garry Kasparov himself had many difficulties facing the c3 Sicilian, and we will show you how to play our special weapon against his favorite, early bishop to g4. Now against bishop to g4, what we do is we force black to make a choice. He can either A, recapture on c5 and his queen is exposed and we develop an initiative by taking advantage of his exposed queen and our lead in development, or B, he can exchange queens and be a pawn down. In the first case, we will show you 9 games of how to develop your initiative and create winning possibilities. In the second, we will show you all the nuances in this pawn plus endgame. Thank you for taking time to view this DVD, and in it we saw how to play against Garry's favorite early bishop to g4. The system with d takes c5 really narrows black's choices and puts him on your home turf. Coming up in Volume 4, we will look at how to play after queen takes d5 when black plays an early e6, and we will show you a couple of ways to get very, very nice initiative against that setup. That will be the first 8 games. Then, from there, we will look at what I call c3 crunches. These are games where one side or the other, usually black, simply didn't really make it too far past the opening. There will be quite a few of those examples. You will learn many tactical motifs that will help you win many, many, many points. I know they've certainly helped me win a lot of games through the years. To kick off Volume 3 on this series of DVDs on the c3 Sicilian, we're going to look at a very nice analytical weapon, one that you will be able to employ quite often after e4, c5, c3, d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, d4, knight c6, pressuring our pawn on d4, knight f3, and now the very active pin. Kasparov himself likes this pin quite a bit. However, pluses and minuses. The pin quite often does leave the pawn on b7 a touch weak, and it ignores the kingside development. Now, theory normally gives bishop e2, which is very heavily analyzed, and does not particularly offer any advantage. In the earlier DVDs, instead of bishop g4, we covered c takes d4, cd4, e5, knight c3, bishop b4, and now bishop d2. After bishop c3, e4, knight e5, knight takes, pawn takes, knight e7, queen a4 check, the Nimzowitsch variation, and after bishop d7, queen a3. We covered this quite extensively and showed how to get very promising attacking play for white. In addition, we also covered cd4, e5, knight c3, bishop b4, and the interesting piece sacrifice, bishop e2, after which e4 castles, threatens to capture the queen, bishop takes c3, bc3, ef, bishop f3, and for the price of one piece, white has very good activity. Open e-file, a3 diagonal, tempo on the black queen, black king in the center. And we also covered 5 e5 without the exchange of c-pawns. There, the key thing to remember is to play knight takes on e5. After knight e5, de5, queen e5, you now interpose the bishop on e3, not on e2. You want to save the e2 bishop so you can slap bishop to b5 check on at the right moment. Here we looked at the game Kramnik missed a huge opportunity against Judith Polgar. So now, how do we play against bishop g4? And here's our special weapon. With the knight on c6, quite often it's very nice to play the capture d takes c5. This really limits black's choices. A, he can capture on c5, as we will see in the game Sveshnikov-Kozuks from Riga 2007, a fairly recent game. Choice B is that he can exchange queens, and after king takes, he has to worry about recouping his pawn on c5. Being a pawn down in the endgame is not necessarily to everyone's taste. Also, the Sicilian player likes to attack the king. He doesn't necessarily like to grovel around, try to scrape a draw, a pawn down in the endgame. Stylistically, this could be very adverse to many Sicilian players. First, let's take a look at this important endgame. After e5, black threatens to recoup the pawn and threatens e4, attacking the pinned knight. We then play b4. Our hope lies with our queenside majority. Black can now play a5. We then play bishop to b5, and there's a couple of variations here. After castles, with check, we play king c2. On a takes b4, we interpolate, bishop takes c6, and if he simply recaptures, we can now recapture if we want, or play bishop to e3. After bishop f5 check, king b3, b takes c6. This is important. If you play c takes b4, e4 gives black some initiative. Very easy to fall into. What we do though is we play bishop to e3. Bishop to e3 secures our pawn on c5 and prepares to capture the black pawn on e5. Black can of course now play e4, but then knight d4 gives us a very nice initiative. A huge gain of tempo against this bishop will allow us to capture the pawn on b4 in style. After bishop to e6 check in this moment, we can then play king back to c2, and on bishop f5 check, if we want to play for a win, which we are playing white, we drop our king back to c1. Now, capturing on c3 allows us to capture on e5, threatening the fork. This turns out rather badly for black. After knight h6, we recapture our pawn. We threaten the pawn on c6. We're a solid pawn ahead, and one could even argue after rook to d1 that we're actually ahead in development. Black does have the two bishops, but we have an outside passed a pawn. Black has an uphill fight for a draw in that position. So let's take another look. Queen d1, king d1, e5, b4. After a5, bishop to b5, black can also play knight at gd7. Then we step up with our king. After bishop f3, gf3, a takes b4, Sveshnikov had one game where he recaptured on b4. But after castles, bishop takes c6, knight c6, and a3, he did secure his queenside pawns, but after knight d4 check, king c3, and bishop e7, he had potential problems with this queenside development. But even here, white could play knight d2. After a takes b4, Sveshnikov actually played rook to d1, opting for his own development, and preventing black from castling queenside. After knight f5, he then took on c6, and after bc6, took on b4, and after knight d4 check, king c3, white did enjoy some initiative. For example, black could take on f3. Fritz gives it as equal, but I suspect that after h3, white might be a touch better. After all, white does have a 3-to-1 queenside majority. In fact, continuing on, after bishop e7, a4, bishop f6, bishop b2, e4 check, this was my private analysis. King b3, bishop takes b2, king b2, and now knight e5. Looks very promising, threatens to come into d3 check. However, the power of the passed pawns. You simply play knight to c3, threatening the pawn on e4, and after rook b8, you play b5. On f5, you play b6, and on knight d3 check, threatening your king and your pawn, you more than happily sacrifice the exchange, and then play a5. Easy to see that these pawns and this knight are worth more than this rook. This is typical type of play that white can look for. White banks on his queenside majority when you play this endgame. Your hope lies with promoting these pawns. So let's go back. After d takes c5, timely capture. You give him a choice. Trade queens or recapture the pawn. Hard to know what they'll do. Some players will do one, some will do the other. However, I will say that when they capture this pawn, and they already have a knight on c6, bishop to e3, as Sveshnikov played in our key game here, is very uncomfortable because the queen now needs to retreat back to c7, for example, or to c8. However, with the knight on c6, the queen is uncomfortably harassed at this point. After queen a5, queen b3. Again, remember we mentioned, when the bishop develops early, the b7 pawn is quite often a touch weak. Queen has to move again. Someone has to go home and defend. Note that if castles, simply knight d2, with the idea of bishop to b5, is quite promising. We don't rush to capture this pawn, but instead we continue our development. We can capture a pawn like that later. If black now plays e6, for example, then bishop to b5 can be quite annoying. You can see black has problems. So in the game, after queen b3, black retreated his queen back to c7 to protect the b7 pawn. Now, a favorite tool to keep in mind, knight a3. This is very useful development when the black queen is on c7. After bishop f3, gf3, well, yes, we do have these doubled kingside pawns, but on the other hand, we still have our bishop pair, and we have our queenside majority of 3-2. Plus, not to mention the lead in development. In the game, black played e6. Let's take a look if he plays a6, keeping our knight off of b5. Well then, castles certainly looks tempting, and after e6, knight to c4, exploiting the hole on b6, and there, for example, if b5, then knight b6, rook d8. Notice that rook b8 is met by knight d7, getting rid of the bishop, and after knight b6, rook d8, we just have a clear lead in development. After knight c4, the immediate rook d8 can be met by takes, knight takes, and then f4. After knight f6, bishop g2, we can see our bishops are really pressuring the queen side here. For example, b5, knight e5, bishop d6, and then a4 is quite strong. Even if black were to capture twice here, for example, takes, takes, and then a move like bishop f1, we can see the pawn on b5 has been left high and dry. Once we capture that puppy, we will have two connected passed pawns, virtually guaranteeing a win in any endgame. So going back, after bishop f3, gf3, black played e6. Again, this is the game Sveshnikov, Kazuk's, Riga, 2007. Fairly recent game. Knight to b5. What this shows is that Sveshnikov is still catching people in bad variations. Now, queen b8 would be met by queen a4. And after a6, knight d4, we see the knight on c6 is pinned. If queen c7, c8, we then castle, and on b5, we simply back up with queen c2. Black's had to mess around, lose a lot of time, and still has not addressed the issue of the kingside development or king safety. White, for his part, has double pawns, but bishop pair and queenside majority and lead in development. Going back after knight b5, black played queen c8. But now, bishop to f4. This seems to be one of the favorite diagonals for Sveshnikov in these type of positions. Simply threatens to juice into c7 check. After e5, he now strikes with the other bishop and forms a battery against the pawn on f7. Black played bishop c5. However, note that e takes f4, bishop check, king e7, and castles. And we can see it's open season down the middle of the board on the black king. For example, knight h6, rook over, king up, rook in, king takes, rook takes, king back, rook takes, and queen e6 check. Is pretty much the end of that story. So going back after bishop c4, this must have been a very unpleasant surprise for black. He played bishop c5. But after the simple bishop e3, bishop on bishop, bishop takes e3, white tossed in a crushing family fork, royal fork with knight d6 check. Black, appropriately enough, resigned.